No more witnesses, no more evidence. The slim Senate Republican majority slams the door on those aiming to deepen the case against President Trump. With acquittal looming, will this GOP stonewall help or hurt come November? Here at home, a resounding win for Republicans in the battle to control the State House. Can Democrats bounce back from their HD 28 defeat in the quest to turn Texas blue? And on the eve of the nation's first presidential primary, who's surging and who's crashing in Iowa? It's caucus time in the Hawkeye State as the survival of the political fittest unfolds. I'm Greg Groogan, and welcome to Watch Your Point, where our panelists call it like they see it. Let's greet them. Starting us off, legendary reporter turned investigative media consultant Wayne Dolcefino. Next up, legal analyst and Houston attorney Carmen Roe. In the 3 spot, Bob Price, associate editor of Breitbart Texas. Batting cleanup, former reporter and mayoral communications chief Janice Evans. Next up, Charles Blain, founder of the advocacy group Urban Reform. And closing us out on that hot corner, writer, educator, and radio host Antonio Diaz. Let's begin. For all practical purposes, it's over. After a numbing onslaught of sound and an exhaustive outpouring of partisan fury, the Senate impeachment trial of Donald J. Trump is poised to end the way we all knew it would. With Democrats unable to secure even the handful of Republican votes necessary just to call additional witnesses and evidence. As to the 67 votes needed for impeachment, that was never in either side's realistic equation. Boiling down the mountain of claims and counterclaims, the arguments and rebuttals, the allegations and explanations, for me, there was no more telling moment than the words the president's attorney, Alan Dershowitz, delivered.
And if a president does something which he believes will help him get elected in the public interest, that cannot be the kind of quid pro quo that results in impeachment.
Okay, as all of you remind me frequently, I may not be the sharpest knife in the kitchen, but that sounds as if America's chief executive has a green light for any potentially self-serving directive short of demonstrable treason. I guess you disagree, Wayne.
You know what? Look, I want to preface this by saying I do like you, okay? But I think everyone's going insane here. Okay, the only people that, in my view, look, I'm not going to defend everything Donald Trump does because I think he does some things that even I wouldn't do. Okay, but let me tell you something. The people that have really weakened the democracy in this country in the last 4 years are the Democrats. Okay, it's this Russia, Russia, Russia. Everyone's a spy for 2.5 years, and now they went into an impeachment that you just said in your open realistically was never going to happen. That's what exactly the framers said. Don't do it if it's one side doing it. And that's what they did, because it's not about truth and justice. It's about theater. Greg, and you know that.
Okay, Tony. Look, you guys got a choice to make. You can either slow drip this thing all the way through November, or you can move on and make your points on other policy issues. What do you do?
Keep revealing all this evidence, because this is demonstrated is that when Donald Trump does shoot somebody on Madison Avenue, what the Republican senators are going to say is, yeah, he shot the guy, but he died because he had high blood pressure, he had diabetes, nobody liked him. We don't know the cause of life, really. How do we know the cause of death? So basically, they're giving a blank check to do whatever he wants. And when squeamish Democrats get in a firefight or argument with Republicans and they get scared because someone might call Bernie Sanders a socialist Democrat, they need to answer by saying Trump is now a socialist dictator. He's acting like a socialist dictator. And I need to remind people that Hugo Chavez, this jerk in Venezuela, they had Congress too. They have legislations too. And guess what? They rubber stamp everything he does. They cover up for him just like they're happening now. What I'm proud of is the American people can see all this evidence and vote him out. There's one last stop, and that's we, the American people. He's going to get voted out in November for all this.
Bob Price, State of the Union this week. What is the state of our union after the impeachment?
Well, anybody that thinks that this is over is not paying attention, because the Democrats weren't set out to impeach the president and remove him from office. Right. This was just one more step in the continuing theater against Donald Trump. So it doesn't matter. You know, the Democrats could have, Nancy Pelosi could have put somebody in charge of the investigation that would have done a fair and balanced investigation. Adam Schiff could have called witnesses and subpoenaed witnesses. He chose not to. Adam Schiff could have let the president's counsel cross-examine witnesses. He chose not to. He chose continuously, time after time after time, to make the process unfair and to not provide the evidence to the Senate where they could make an informed decision. He wanted the Senate to take the time to do that. They didn't have time. We have to rush to judgment. We have to get it done. But, oh, the Senate, you guys can take all year to do it if you want to, but we only had 3 weeks to get it done. So that's the whole issue on this. They were not interested at all in finding out the truth.
Janice Evans, I know you to be a clear-eyed political pragmatist, and we're looking forward to some fresh commentary here. What's your take?
Look, the Senate had a job to do, and they haven't done it.
They were the jury.
There's a but that's in their explanation as to what's going on. Yeah, he did it. It was wrong, but in my opinion, the Senate needs to get off its butt and do its job so that we can make sure that this is handled correctly. As for Nancy Pelosi, what a wonderful job she has done in handling this. It's been brilliant and a really good showing for them. Now, as far as is it over? No, it's not over. And in terms of not doing the job, let's also look at John Bolton. John Bolton could hold a news conference at any day. He's trying to maintain his GOP cred so that he can come forward and say, look, I helped you out doing this.
Okay, Carmen Roe, as a veteran of many trials, what did you want to hear, John Bolton? Do you think the American people are being shortchanged by not hearing John Bolton on the Senate floor? Because we're going to hear a lot of John Bolton.
Not at all. I don't think this is a but. I think this is the issue. The issue isn't whether these facts are there. They're out there. Everybody in America, to one extent or another, agrees on the facts. The issue is whether or not this is the high crimes and misdemeanors that we want to see that would ultimately lead to impeachment. That is the issue. And just as Bob Price said, at the end of the day, this was a huge miscalculation by the Democrats in not calling witnesses and litigating those subpoenas in the House. And then they tried to browbeat and cry foul when it didn't get done in the Senate. And so the only issue we were waiting to see is whether or not they could successfully coerce the Senate into calling witnesses and subpoenaing records. And they said, you know what, you didn't do enough to even get us that far. This is like an overconfident prosecutor who loses a trial and then says this wasn't right and justice isn't fair.
Okay, Charles Blain playing a little hurt today. Close us out on this topic.
Yeah, I think Carmen's right. They wanted to coerce the Senate into doing their job, and I think Bob makes a great point as well, is that the House had the opportunity and they had the time to do this, but they chose to fast track it and rush it through and try to put this on the Senate. And I think we leave, you know, being more fractured than we were before. There's no more information out there. People are tired of watching this, and even if the Senate were to call witnesses, I don't think the American public is engaged enough that it's going to make any big of a difference.
Okay, all right. Well, when we come back, we'll examine the fallout of this impeachment moving forward politically, and later we'll head to ground zero of the gun control debate and examine a slate of new Virginia laws. Stay with us.
In all of their horror, they will come out, and we will be asked why we didn't want to hear that information when we had the chance.
Friday, lead Democratic impeachment manager Adam Schiff issued what seemed to me a clear warning to the Republican senators he was trying and failing to persuade. If all or part of Schiff's prediction proves true, will it matter? Before you answer that question, here's what Trump's ex-chief of staff, General John Kelly, said. Quote, if you don't respond to 75% of the American voters and have witnesses, it's a job only half done, and you open yourself up forever as a Senate that shirks its responsibilities. So is that just talk, or the GOP majority, has it done itself some real damage? I'll go to Bob.
The Senate is the jury in this case. It's the House's job to investigate. It's the House's job to build its case. Adam Schiff came into the Senate chamber and said he had proof beyond all reasonable doubt of the guilt of the president in this case. He didn't make his case. He said it 30 times during the Senate trial that he had more than enough evidence. He didn't need the witnesses, and yet they're still crying foul.
Janice, can Schiff come through on that and do some real damage to Republican credibility?
I think that this is going to continue to dribble out over the next few weeks, next few months. They can always call Bolton back to the House and have him testify. The book's going to come out, and he's going to maximize that to his benefit as much as possible. So I think you will continue to see this come out. Okay, is this a bluff, Wayne? You think that the Republicans could get some blowback later on?
Look, everyone gets it, right? The question of this thing has never been, was this dirty politics? It was, but you know what? The media acts like it's okay that all of Joe Biden's family, his brothers, cousins, mamas, kinfolk, they're all got rich off government contracts in foreign countries, and it's like nothing to see here. Can we just start being fair? I'm fine with people taking shots at Donald Trump, but you say something about Joe Biden, it's like, oh my God, he's Jesus. You can't, how dare you question him? When everyone knows it is what it is. It's a duck. Look at the duck.
Okay, Tony, is Biden the second coming?
Well, first of all, regarding ducks, Trump better not even bring up nepotism, because his family only works because of nepotism. That's one thing. Secondly, 51 to 49 were the votes. Guess what? Among them was Texas Senator John Cornyn. We got 200,000 votes within taking out Ted Cruz. We got to get rid of Cornyn this election and another Republican senator to get our democracy back, because Cornyn voted to cover up for Trump. These days have got to end. We got to make sure that we have democracy back. No more socialist dictators. No more wannabe socialist dictators in the White House.
Woo, got to leave it there. Still ahead, 1,000 miles to the north, folks in Iowa are primed and ready to caucus. Who will prevail and who will plummet Monday in the nation's first presidential primary? That topic on our table after the break. On cue, as the impeachment ends, the presidential primaries begin tomorrow, to be exact, with caucusing in Iowa. This year's contest appears to be highly competitive. The latest polls have Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden fighting for the lead. New to the number 3 spot, Amy Klobuchar with a late surge, followed closely by Elizabeth Warren. The Iowa sub-narrative: how many of the second-tier candidates will elevate and how many will fade off the trail? I turn to Charles Blain.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I'm surprised that a lot of the second-tier candidates are still in at this point, but I do think that after we see Iowa, we're going to start seeing, you know, these donors who are given to Buttigieg and Yang and Steyer are going to start falling off and moving to, and supporters are going to start falling off and moving to some of these other people. So I do see them starting to fall off. But what is interesting is we don't even have the formal Iowa poll this year, because, you know, there was some mix-up in the call center, and Buttigieg's campaign complained about it. So we don't know what that's looking like going into that, but I definitely see them falling off to the wayside after Monday.
Okay, Janice, we see Sanders has a real chance to win Iowa. What does that do to Democratic prospects?
Well, Iowa's very, very early, and I think we need to look more toward March for this, but the Democrats have an issue at the top of the ticket as to whether or not they're going to have a moderate there that will appeal to those in the middle, because Democrats are going to vote for Democrats, Republicans are going to vote for Republicans. There's those ones that are maybe a little bit undecided and they don't like what's there right now, they want to change. So the Democrats have to come forward and give them a candidate. I don't know that Elizabeth Warren is that candidate.
Decidedly not shaking in his boots about anybody on the Democratic slate in Iowa, Wayne Dolcefino.
Look, no, I love all people. Please run. I don't. That's fine. Do your thing. But look, if you notice that everyone goes around saying, well, I'm going to go with Joe Biden because he's safe. He makes me feel comfortable like my Uncle Bob, right? Without really addressing the elephant in the room, is that the guy says a bunch of things that make no sense, okay? And that's the Democrat problem. A lot of the sort of what moderate Democrats, the ones that aren't like totally like in left field, right? They're stuck, because Biden is never going to carry the day for them. No matter what the polls may say now, every time this guy opens his mouth, he says stuff that makes people sort of realize his better days have passed.
Okay, talking about stuck in the mud, Elizabeth Warren, who spent a bunch of time in Iowa, looks like she may be in tough shape. I mean, I know your favorite, Julian Castro, is her surrogate there. I mean, what's your take on what's going on?
Well, I think there's going to be some surprises in Iowa, and I think really the real story is they're about to get Ubered as well, because you got Tom Steyer spending a lot of money in other states a little later. And then also you've got Bloomberg spending a lot of money all over the place, including Texas. So what's fascinating to me is, yes, there's going to be an impact. I think there'll be some surprises. I don't think anyone's going away too soon. But really, it's going to be these other players that are going to make Iowa less important or have a different role. And I think Texas is in play because you got Steyer and Bloomberg spending a lot of money in Texas. I will say this, though. Yes, Julian's not on the stage. I don't really see any candidate, maybe Tom Steyer, appealing to Latinos profoundly. And also, Bloomberg, we really got to put them all through the stress test because I think Biden doesn't pass the stress test. He fumbles. He's got a sense of entitlement. Democrats got to be really tough on each other because no matter how hard and mean we are to each other, Trump is going to be even worse.
Final 30 seconds, Bobo.
So Mr. Castro tied his rope to the Titanic, unfortunately for him. But that said, never say die, Hillary Clinton is back. And this weekend talking about the Iowa caucus, saying that it's not fair and we should not be making judgments about who should be president based upon the Iowa caucus. So there you go, Iowa.
I spent some time in Vermont. I'm not so sure New Hampshire is very fair either. Okay, still ahead. Sweet victory for conservative Gary Gates in the first clash for control of the Texas House. Can Republicans replicate their lopsided win in Fort Bend County, or will their early success be short-lived? Hang with us. What's your point? We'll be right back. Welcome back. The battle for control of the Texas House got underway with a lopsided GOP victory in the HD 28 special election between Republican Gary Gates and Liz Markowitz. While the Fort Bend County District has long been firmly in the Republican column, Democrats from far and wide invested significant money and hefty endorsements in the effort to flip the suburban seat. Question is, this sobering loss an exception or reflective of Democratic prospects in the races to come? Charles Blain, you watch this one.
Yeah, I think it's reflective. So if you look at this race, Markowitz lost with a larger margin than the previous Democratic nominee did in HD 28. And sure, that was a presidential year, and this is an off-year election. But you had O'Rourke, Warren, Castro, Biden, I think Bloomberg, all campaigning for her. They turned this into a national race. If there was any chance to get dissatisfied Republicans or moderate Republicans to cross over, plus her base to close that gap, this was it. I don't think they're going to be able to do it going into November.
We had a researcher in the field this week talking to suburban moms. Carmen, what did you hear in your talk this weekend?
Is that Carmen? Okay.
So I was out in Katy talking with moms and business women who, as you said, are kingmakers when it comes to politics and things like that. And, they talked a lot about the difference between the Republicans and the Democrats came down to the finances. And as much crazy as might be going on in the White House right now, their finances are in good shape and they expect it to continue to incline over the next couple years. And so they're safely in a Republican camp for that reason alone. So.
Okay, Bob, are the Republicans fired up?
Absolutely. The Fort Bend County went solid blue in the last election, and this is a significant win. The good news out of this is Bob O'Rourke is now 0 for 3. He came in there wielding the quote-unquote big stick, thought he could make a big difference, and yet again, he couldn't do it.
Janice, what are you hearing out there on the street moving forward for the Democrats?
Well, first of all, this was a special election in January. It's very hard to get people to go and vote for that. So I wouldn't put that much into this one. There are about 22 races that are being targeted. The Democrats are going to fight hard, and it's going to happen. If it doesn't happen in 2020, it will happen. We've made some advances 2 years ago. We're going to see more this time, and it will happen. So everybody just needs to get ready for it.
Okay, the closing confrontation. Wayne, you go first. Tony, you close.
Okay, breaking news. People, regardless of what flavor they are or where their grandparents came from, most people in my beloved Katy area out there where I used to live, they all work, they all pay big mortgages, they have to put their kids through school. They care about that. That's what they care about. That's why they voted for the guy and not her.
Okay, discouraged about 28?
No, because everybody ignores Latino issues. No one's talking about the race in District 138, where the Republicans ran a Hispanic to try and win a Hispanic opportunity district, and he lost because guess what? Breaking news, Republican districts are won by Republicans, Latino districts, Democratic, Latinos are Democrats, Democratic districts are won by Democrats if you try the old rules. So here's some news. Go for new voters, energize the base that doesn't think that voting matters, get kids involved, change it, or else you're going to have the same results again and again and again. No news here.
So you're calling it a wake-up call?
wake-up call for everybody.
All right, up next, she's the top prosecutor in the third most populous county in America. District Attorney Kim Ogg is in our hot seat to make her case for a second term in office. Oh, and later, a controversial new tool in the nation's struggle to control illegal immigration. We're talking the Trump administration plan to seize DNA from those caught crossing our border without permission. Stay with us. Watch your point. We'll be right back. Kim Ogg holds one of the most demanding jobs in the great state of Texas. Elected in 2016, she serves as Harris County District Attorney, the chief prosecutor for a jurisdiction delivering criminal justice for nearly 5 million residents. It's a tough job, but one she hopes voters in both the primary and general election will decide she should keep. With that, Kim Ogg, welcome to the hot seat.
Thanks for having me, Greg.
You bet. Hey, you've been at the helm for 3 years and 1 month. I call this the hanging curveball. What accomplishments are you most proud of?
I'm most proud of bringing common sense reform to a system that wasn't adequately protecting us. We've got a ways to go on public safety, but I think we're making the changes that will put the resources where they need to be. People want murder, rape, and robbery prosecuted. They don't want marijuana and mental health to be treated the same way. So I'm proud of putting the priority where the people want it and doing that with the staff that we've got.
Look, you ran and won as a criminal justice reformer, and yet the county seems to be embroiled in a controversy over what that reform should look like. Now, how do we find balance that protects defendants without exposing the public to criminals prone to violence?
Well, the whole job of DA is balancing the interests of public safety and individual freedom. That's what our constitutional rights protect. So with every case, we look to the evidence. That's why we say we're an evidence-based office. When it comes to things like bail reform, of course I was not for keeping marijuana offenders, criminal mischief, low-level nonviolent people in jail simply because they were poor. They didn't endanger the community. But I'm not for releasing repeat and violent offenders back to prey on the public. And we see some of that with as far as bail reform got pushed. It's a good idea, but the devil's always in the details. So I'm still for it, but I'm not for letting the pendulum swing too far against public safety.
You have unsuccessfully so far pleaded with Harris County commissioners to fund dozens of additional positions in your office and made a pretty compelling argument that more prosecutors doesn't necessarily mean more prosecutions, but rather better prosecutions and outcomes. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, being smart on crime is just going to require enough people to help the 4.5 million to 5 million people that we represent in this jurisdiction. It's a math problem at some point. I have been successful in getting more environmental prosecutors and more civil rights prosecutors to handle Harding Street and other police shootings that we're now investigating and presenting to grand juries and seeing indictments on. So I've been successful when I asked for special prosecutors, and I think that with the new TSU report on just the population study, how understaffed, we're the least staffed of most of the top 20 DA's offices in the country in big urban areas. At some point, commissioners are just going to have to do the math, and we need people to help people.
So are you saying more prosecutors would allow your office to decide, you know, those individuals in society who are salvageable versus those who need to be incarcerated?
You said it better than I did. It takes time for a lawyer to work a file, whether it's a diversion file and you want to put somebody into treatment, or whether it's a murderer or a rapist. They take a different amount of time, but they both take time to make sure we handle properly, make sure the person's rights are protected, and that the public is safe. And so it just takes lawyers to work cases. Our lawyers are going to give good service, but until they fully fund me, there's an artificial bottleneck at the courthouse.
If voters should decide you need to continue serving, what do you hope to get done in the second term? And I'm assuming bringing the very complicated Harding Street case to a close would be at the top of the list.
Well, you're not just reading my mind. We talked about that. Harding Street is the biggest police corruption case I've ever been involved with or seen in Houston. I think nationwide it's going to have an impact, and it just is taking time to get through the mountain of evidence and cases that we have to look at, but we're getting to the truth. This second round of grand jury investigation should produce some interesting results. So, of course, I'm asking the public to allow me to complete that investigation because it's so important to the public trust to know what really happened. But moreover, I want to continue the programs that we're doing, like for mental health, where there's a 70% non-repeat offense rate. We call that recidivism. Less than 30% recidivism rate, because we're handling mental health like a public health problem instead of putting them in jail where they die, they get injured, and they don't get better. So common sense is what the public wants in government. I think it's what they want in criminal justice. And to truthfully bring business practices to government helps taxpayers.
Kim Ogg, thanks for taking the hot seat.
Thanks, Greg.
Okay, there's a lot more of What's Your Point just ahead. Welcome back. Another controversial move by the Trump administration, which is proceeding with plans to collect DNA samples from immigrants under detention after entering our country without permission. Now, if the pilot program is expanded, the Justice Department could accumulate a massive database of genetic material from the approximately 750,000 immigrants detained each year. Civil libertarians are calling the measure a gross violation of privacy and what amounts to a discriminatory mass surveillance of immigrant communities. I'm going to my legal eagle, Carmen Roe.
Oh, sorry.
When you read about this, what did you think?
I think there's no question this is a civil rights violation. I mean, the widespread taking of DNA from individuals who've never been convicted of a felony or are not violent criminals is something we've never seen. It's never happened. And while the argument may be that it doesn't matter, it does matter. That's why we provide those rights to everyone in this country. We don't take DNA from anyone unless and until a violent crime has been committed or a felony. And I think it bears mentioning that if you do not turn over your DNA by swabbing the inside of your cheek for any of these individuals, you'll be charged with a federal misdemeanor in these situations. So I hope that the litigation on this continues and that we start protecting the rights of the individuals, or we'll have none for the rest of us.
The argument is that they've already broken American law by coming here without permission. So they have committed a crime, but I don't know.
Not a felony, not a violent crime.
Bob, take it from here.
And so apparently if they can be charged with a misdemeanor for not supplying the DNA, there's a law in the books that says they must do this. So otherwise they wouldn't be violating the law where they could be prosecuted for that. The issue, one of the serious things in this is every week I report about previously deported criminal aliens that come back into this country. 90% of those that we get information about are sex offenders, either rapists or child rapists, child molesters, things like that. These are things where DNA evidence would be very vital in finding them if they're committing repeat offenses around the country. So I support collecting this information. You can't change your DNA. You can change your name if you go somewhere else, but you can't change your DNA.
Tony, you object.
Let's put it this way. Donald Trump is such a pro at quid pro quo. He probably bought shares in 23andMe, which is why he wants to do this. And this is yet another attack on civil liberties, human rights, public decency. Because guess what? The same Border Patrol, they can take these folks, they can demand to look at their social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. They can demand that they get their passwords. They can demand that they take their phones. They can demand that they get their passes to phone. And here's what's even worse. Hey, America, you forget that you were profiling Latinos in Montana who were speaking Spanish, and there's video of Border Patrol agents saying, hey, let's see your citizenship papers because you're speaking Spanish. There's only one way to fix all this mismanagement of the border, deterioration of democracy, is to vote Donald Trump out and get fairness back in America.
I'm not even looking at Wayne's apoplectic.
No, look, I actually think Tony's 23andMe line was actually funny, right? But in reality, I'm opposed to this DNA testing, Bob, because I don't want to spend any money on it. Don't come here unless you're actually invited, right? We just have to just face facts. We can't afford it. And Tony's suggestion, though, that peasants in Guatemala all have Instagram was a little bit shocking to me. I didn't know that. I didn't realize it was big Instagram.
Anyone with the cell phone does.
Well, how about this? How about we all give some DNA?
Right.
How about we all give some DNA?
Sure.
Jump in here.
I volunteer.
Look, the only thing I have to say about this is that there's a request for a DNA sample from our president that he's ignoring for a rape victim
Very good.
from the 1990s, and I think if we're going to be giving up DNA, then let's get that one.
Final word to Charles, and maybe make it back.
So to take a line from my friend Tamara Bell, this is crazy with a capital C-R-A-Z-Y. There is no reason that we should be taking DNA from illegal immigrants without their consent. I mean, DNA, there's no public safety interest in this. We can't determine through their DNA if they're going to commit another crime. And I do not trust the government that they're not going to creep and then want to take my DNA because I ran a red light. So
okay,
there is a reason. Juveniles are being kidnapped and sold and rented in Central America to come up to make fake family asylum claims in the United States. You need to be able to prove that familial relationship, and also the type of DNA they're collecting is not it's not even as broad-based as 23andMe. It will only identify immediate family relationships.
Gonna leave it
Smarter
there.
ways to do that.
Still ahead, in the wake of Second Amendment protests, Virginia lawmakers push through new gun control laws. Are the measures common sense or a step down the slippery slope to seizure? We tackle the topic after the break. Welcome back. Halfway across the country, in a state some are calling ground zero in the battle over Second Amendment rights, the democratically controlled Virginia House of Delegates has passed 7 pieces of gun control legislation. The measures include limiting handgun purchases to once a month, universal background checks, and a red flag law to legally remove firearms from the dangerous and unstable. Notably, a proposed ban on so-called semi-automatic assault rifles has not advanced out of Virginia's lower house in the face of bipartisan opposition. During the past few weeks, gun owners across Virginia campaigned vigorously, resulting in nearly 100 counties declaring themselves Second Amendment sanctuaries. Question, is this an overreaction given the fairly modest nature of the legislation likely to become law? Bob, I'm going right back to you.
I'm going to be consistent here. I don't favor anybody taking sanctuary laws and disregarding the law of this country. So if a law is passed that you don't like, you don't believe is unconstitutional, you don't ignore it, you challenge it in the courts. You don't declare yourself to be a sanctuary city or a sanctuary community. Wish the Democrats would learn this on the immigration law, but we don't do that here. Now, that said, these protesters were treated like slime. They were called white supremacists. This is going to be a repeat of Charlotte. These were law-abiding citizens coming out to protect their constitutional rights. And many of these laws are overreaching, and they are gun-grabbing laws. They're not going to do anything to increase gun safety. But when you take guns away from people without due process, that's depriving of their constitutional rights and liberties.
Okay, Carmen, jump in here. You studied this some.
Yeah, I mean, I have a law degree, and what I would say is I echo what Bob says. Sanctuary cities are not a thing, or they shouldn't be. But challenging these laws is a thing. And what everybody needs to understand, again, I'll say, nobody understands what we have on the books now. I have a couple of degrees, and I don't understand some of the laws that are out there because they're so complicated, they're so convoluted. And so when you talk about we're going to take guns from the unstable and the dangerous, really? How do we know who those people are, and how are we taking them away? And so again, this you know, across the board passing of laws like this law that would deal with unstable or people that are dangerous, I have a problem with the fact that no one will get in there and figure out what we actually have, what's working, and then put something that's common sense in place to protect everyone, including the Second Amendment rights.
Janice, Progressive have on their side some numbers, polling numbers that show that most Americans support universal background checks and probably would support only buying one handgun a month.
Right. Who needs? I find myself, as I was reading and researching on this, it's like, what? Who goes and buys more than one gun a month? Who's buying more than one gun every couple of months?
Somebody's buying a collection set that has two guns in it.
That's an issue to begin with. It's like the questions around there. But those who are running the Virginia House ran on a platform of gun control. They are doing what they said, and that was based on what the polling showed that state and the people who live there want. So nobody's rights are being trampled upon. You can still have your gun in Virginia. It's just that these are common sense controls that are being put in place to address the situations that we've had going on in this country.
Wayne, can an argument be made that by protesting in a very public way that the Second Amendment folks, had an impact on this legislation?
Well, maybe, but look, first of all, the only reason people were upset is because they said there's a bunch of white people with guns, so they must be up to no good. That's where we've gone in this country, because Tony and people like him want everyone to be in a box of chocolate somewhere, okay? The reality is, people who are criminals don't go buy guns in stores usually, okay? The guy that's gonna rob you or try to rape your mama or your sister, they don't buy their guns at stores, whether it's once a month or 3 times a month. They buy them from some dude in exchange for some crack on the street. Common sense is fine, but it's not gonna change anything.
Okay, gosh.
Wayne just said he's against chocolate.
We gotta leave it there.
That analogy.
Coming up, billionaire presidential candidate Mike Bloomberg calls out other Democrats on universal health care. Is his the voice of fiscal reason moderate Americans have been craving? Stay with us. We will be right back. Mayor, Medicare for all, single payer, universal health care, call it what you want. Both Sanders and Warren say America has to have it, regardless of the cost. Simple question, would that kind of price tag, and we're talking $20 trillion plus dollars, crater the economy, and is there a better option?
Well, it would crater the economy. Congress is never going to vote it, and it would bankrupt most hospitals, and doctors would never be able to repay their loans. There'd be cataclysmic results throughout the whole healthcare system.
Calling it like he sees it, billionaire Democrat Mike Bloomberg has exactly 1 month to close a 19-point gap here in Texas before Super Tuesday. Can he do it? Blaine, what did you think of that?
I mean, listen, he's playing that moderate angle that we have come to see him play. You know, he has, if you look at his record, he has a very liberal record when he was mayor, but he does play this moderate card very well. And when he talks like that, folks in South Carolina, like my parents who are sitting there getting ready to vote in the Democratic primary and looking for a candidate, they find that appealing, and I think others do as well. When
Mike Bloomberg says that universal health care will crater the economy, I listen. Do you think that's just tough talk?
I think Bernie will school him in a debate. Now, I will say this. I will vote for anyone who is the Democratic candidate in July. So I'll vote. I don't think Bloomberg is going to get there for many reasons, including, so you got Republicans calling him liberal. Progressives think he's not progressive enough. We're not going to forget stop and frisk. We're not going to forget that he didn't open his mouth to stop Donald Trump during the Central 5 Park escapades. And right now, the DNC is going to create affirmative action for billionaires by making it easier for a billionaire to get on the Democratic stage. They didn't change the rules for Booker or Castro, so I don't think he's the right guy to take the ball to the end zone for us.
Janice, does this guy look like a potentially attractive candidate to bring in some of the independents and the moderates?
I think he does, and if you look at the polling, he's polling number 4 across the country. That's pretty good. He hasn't been in any of the debates up till this point. He will be in the last one, and I think that's good. I disagree with Tony on this, that I think it's good that he will be in there. They all pay in some way to be in the debates. Now, if you look at the money that he's spending, he's been criticized for that, and that it could be spent in other better ways. I disagree with that as well, because to him, like this Super Bowl ad he's going to run tonight, I think he's dropped $11 million on it. To him, that's the equivalent, I think I read somewhere, of him of us buying a $17 pizza. It's nothing to him. So he is helping to drive the debate and bring attention to some issues that need to be discussed and I think fleshed out a little bit more.
Bob, if I'm Trump, I'd much rather run against Bernie Sanders than this guy. But, you know, what do I know? What do you think?
Well, absolutely. Any of those people that are left on the stage, he'd rather run against than Bloomberg, I think. But I'm going to agree with Tony here. You know, the Democratic National Party refused to change the rules to keep diversity on their stage. But you got a billionaire white guy wants to buy his way onto the stage. We got it. No problem. Yeah, I think he can win Texas. I think that he can come in here. His TV ads have been very effective. He can bring out that moderate vote in the Democratic Party that exists in Texas, because there is a strong moderate Democrat vote. And I think he's got a real good shot in Texas.
Carmen, you think those soccer moms would like Bloomberg?
I was just thinking that, absolutely. I mean,
the spokesman for soccer moms.
Healthcare in America is an emotional issue that he's touching on, but then he talks about the trillions of dollars in the bankrupt nation. And yes, that goes directly to my Katie moms.
Okay, got to leave it there. Still ahead. Some say we knew it all along, and now there's hard data to prove it. It's a jungle out there on Houston area streets and highways, rated the most dangerous in the nation. Welcome back. A comprehensive national traffic study by GoSafe Labs rates Houston, Texas, the least safe city in the country for driving. The study says we've racked up more than 22,000 accidents last year alone. Panel, this is not where we want to be. Wayne Dolcefino, survivor of a major accident.
So look, I'm a really bad driver. I admit that, right? But look, the reality is a lot of people who drive on Houston streets are jerks. But I have a solution. Okay, free cars. Okay, give everybody free cars. No driver's license, whether you're from here or you just came from some other place. Let's give everyone free cars because people want free stuff in America. It will calm them down. It will make them feel better about themselves.
Carmen, pivot off of that. I don't know.
Okay, if everybody would just get out of my way, it would be fine. That is all.
Okay, Bob.
Okay, I'm actually going to talk about the survey. This thing is
How
flawed.
boring, Bob.
There was no per capita built into this. It just took the largest number of accidents. We have like 10 times more cars than most anybody else in the world. So and Houston went down 12% from last year. So yeah, it's a mess out there, but it's not we're not the most dangerous city in the country.
Okay, Janice, Bob just gave the all clear.
It's our imagination.
People are moving farther out, so we're spending more time on the highway, which is probably a big contributor to it. We haven't built the mass transit that we need, and I would disagree with my good friend Bill King, who says mass transit doesn't solve your traffic problems. I think Houston has done a poor job in that area.
You get 10 seconds each. Go.
Start paying attention while driving. People stop texting and driving, by and large. Stop eating and driving and combing your hair and driving and everything else while driving. Pay attention.
Tony.
It's also dangerous to bike. It's also dangerous to walk. And really the problem is we can't control the flow of traffic or the flow of water. Let's get all that together so we don't flood and we don't crash into each other every day. Think about all this profoundly.
Thank you, Antonio. Okay, the political discussion continues on a national level with Fox News Sunday and host Chris Wallace. The special Super Bowl edition live from Miami starts right now or pretty soon.